I am Ray, and today we are going to learn how to change our lives by changing our frequency. If you get this right, heaven for you. And if you get this wrong, may God have mercy on your soul. I had a profound download the other day, and these are always amazing. Something I had never thought about before. You see, for a long time, I have focused my attention on cultivating awareness. Meaning, I pay close attention to how my thoughts and how my actions are creating my reality. So I'm always reflecting on the things that happen and saying, okay, when was it possible that I may have allowed this thing to happen? Or that I may have created this negative situation or positive? Because if you generally live the same routine every day, you can begin seeing when you deviate from that routine, how that changes your life, how situations occur. In other words, you have a baseline level of reality, and every once in a while, things happen that are anomalies. And you can see that those anomalies were the karmic effect of some kind of action or some kind of thought. And then you can understand which actions lead to a better life. And so I would pay close attention to whenever anything bad happened in my life. And I would think, well, how did this happen? What did I do that caused this? And usually I would understand pretty quickly what I did. Because when you're looking for the evidence, you'll find it. So I could see very clearly how my actions were creating my reality. But I thought it was simply my karma. In other words, the inevitable effect of an action. If I throw this pen up, it falls. Cause and effect. Now, I won't deny karma, but the realization that I came to was something much different than I could have ever imagined. You see, everything is energy. That is the nature of reality. As Nikola Tesla said, if you think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration, you will understand the secrets to the universe. Because the universe is the dynamic play between order and chaos, the yin-yang. In other words, it's infinite energy, order, and zero, chaos. So you have infinite everything and infinite nothingness. They are equal in value, only different or opposite in degree. And so when you divide infinite energy by zero, infinity goes into zero one time. And that oneness is the universe. So, if you imagine infinite energy slowed down all the way to zero, and like an accordion being pulled apart, all of reality is made manifest in between, with everything vibrating at its own unique frequency of existence. And so too, every human being exists at its own unique frequency. Now, one way you can look at this, heaven is simply the highest possible frequency, and hell is the lowest. And here we are, all operating at our own frequency. Let's just say, for instance, that our frequency is our aura, and our aura is like a compilation of many different frequencies, or like the average of our total frequencies. Now there's many ways we can go about this, trying not to go too in depth. Well, I can yap for a minute if you like, before we get to this profound realization. Let me know in the comments, and I'll psychically read you from the past. Wait, I'll psychically read your comments from the future. I'm picking up something. Okay, let's just go into this for a moment, and we'll get back to this. So we all have an aura. Now let's use the chakras in order to describe this. So we have the root, sacral, solar, heart, throat, third eye, crown. And these are all like energy systems. So for instance, your heart has its own intelligence, its own mind. So does your gut. It has its own intelligence. And that intelligence says, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. Do this chemical reaction, contract this muscle, etc. and etc. Now, our overall aura, its frequency is determined by the integrity of our overall energy. What does this mean? It means that if your root chakra is blocked, it's going to lower your frequency. It doesn't matter if you're so spiritual, you're all crown and third eye chakra, as I was for a long time. My natural state, for a while, I was very much third eye. That was my dominant energy. You could say a bit of crown. Lots of sacral. That was about it. I was dominant in third eye, sacral, and crown, meaning I'm a very creative person and I have a strong imagination. So it was natural for me to be spiritual, or to be like this. What do they call it in psychology? INFP or INTP. I am kind of both of those. And we will all have a dominant energy, which also means that we will also be weak in other energies. So for instance, because naturally my head is up in the clouds, I had a hard time being grounded. So a lot of the problems in my life came from being ungrounded. And so when the energy stagnates in that way, it lowers the integrity of the aura of our overall frequency. So there's a few things that matter. The flow of energy and the intensity. So how much energy and how able is that energy to flow? And you could say that results in the integrity of our overall frequency. And the frequency of our overall vibration will determine which timeline we are on. What does this mean? What this means is that in the eternal present moment, there is an infinite potential. We'll come back to this. So this is how reality works. In the present moment, this is your mind. We have a set of potential that is infinite. Now think for a moment. Where did you exist before you were born? You think it's a tough question, I bet. It's not. You existed as potential in the future. And you know this because, well, you are here. If you didn't exist as potential, then you wouldn't exist. But before you were born, you existed in an infinite potential, and then you became actualized, you were conceived, and then you were made manifest. So, you exist not only in your present self, but you also exist as infinite potential. In other words, this is called the self. There are an infinite array of different versions of you, all existing simultaneously. Think about it. There is a version of me that moves my hand like this, or instead moves my hand like that. And that creates a different train of thoughts in which I speak different words, and then I move differently. And then I move 1 inch over here, or 1 inch over here. It's infinite. Infinite possibilities. The further you go out into the future, the more infinite the possibilities are. And the more you get to the present moment, the more the potential is cut off until there are only a few possibilities left, until the one possibility becomes actualized, and that is how reality manifests itself. And that becomes the past. Your mind is like a chopping tool or a pointed tool. It chops off certain potential. I mean, you can see that's like an hourglass, right? The potential gets funneled down into one particular reality, and that is the reality that you experience. But your mind is what allows you to tune into specific realities, specific potential in which that which can be actualized. Now let us return. Now, as I've said it a million times, our mind is a pointed tool that directs the flow of energy. Where attention goes, energy flows. Now, we can direct our attention in 3 ways. If you don't know already, energy is the force of life. Energy is the force of creation. Energy is power. And we can direct our attention in 3 ways. A negative way, a neutral way, and a positive way. When you direct your attention in a negative way, it causes you to lose energy. When you lose energy, it lowers your frequency. As it's often said, hell is eternal death and heaven is eternal life, because heaven and hell exist as potential in the eternal realm. And so, to focus your attention in a negative way is what is called sin. It causes you to lose energy. It causes you to lose the force of life. And where life is not, death is. Like when you turn the lights off to a room, darkness is what remains. So all sin leads to death. All sin leads to hell. All it means is that you focus your attention in a way that causes you to lose energy. And because energy is frequency and vibration, when you focus on negativity, the frequency of your vibration lowers. But if you focus on something that is positive, a positive thought or a positive action, that is what allows you to gain more energy. And when you gain more energy, your frequency increases. Because what is one energy plus one energy? It's two energy. Now, potentially speaking, you have a version of you that is living in hell, and you have a version of you that is living in heaven. And those versions of you each have their own unique frequency. And there's an infinite scale in between. Now, the realization that I had was, well, I thought that because I engaged in a negative action, that I just had to face the inevitable consequences of that action. But I am beginning to think that that is not the case. Deeper truth to the law of karma, to the law of cause and effect. And so my suspicion is now that when I engaged in the low frequency behavior, my frequency dropped and I shifted to a lower frequency timeline in which the problem was already made manifest. So it's not that I was in the same reality experiencing the consequences of my actions, but rather I shifted to a lower reality in which there were already more problems, more suffering. Because the lower you go down on the spectrum, what does it mean to be in hell? It means you're suffering all the time. It means you're always feeling terrible. And so when you shift to lower frequencies, you experience more suffering. Now, a lot of us think that the way to live our best life is about doing. But the formula for reality creation, you could say, is be, do, and have. The more you are, the more you naturally do, and the more you will naturally have. But if you just focus on doing things, trying to get more, you ignore the most important part, being. And so the reason I came up with this video for today is because I was thinking, well, there are so many things that I want to do, but oftentimes we can't find the motivation or the inspiration to do them. Why is that? We know often what we should do, but we can't seem to make ourselves do it. And it is because, as far as I can tell, we're focusing on the wrong thing. You see, an interesting thing happened about a month ago. So I started doing the practice of Ho'oponopono. Now, it is a very beautiful practice. If you don't know what it is simply repeating these 4 phrases. Now, a Ho'oponopono comes from Hawaii. It's an ancient shamanic practice to create harmony in your reality. The people of the tribe, whenever there was a problem, they would come together, and as a group, they would repeat these phrases to restore balance, to restore harmony. But now it's available to all. And so basically the practice is whenever you find yourself in a negative situation, having a negative thought, experiencing something that you don't want to experience, you simply repeat these 4 phrases. I am sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. Now, the reason that this practice exists is because, well, there's this idea of negative karma, but negative memory. Negative memory occurs when we have negative experiences and we feel negative. Just a quick explanation. Our mind takes information in the form of patterns, and our body primarily speaks the language of feelings. So whenever we have a strong feeling about something, our body takes a snapshot. It records whatever pattern we experienced and downloads it as memory. So if you have a traumatic experience where you feel very negative about something, that negative memory is stored in your body. And it will come out later. Trauma blocks the flow of energy. It creates energy blockages. And that energy blockages does what? Lowers our frequency. And then we are forced to face negative things that are a reflection of that negative memory. And by repeating this practice, we can clear away the negative memory. One of the first principles of Ho'oponopono is realizing that everything that we experience is a reflection of us. That there is no separation between our inner reality and our outer reality. And so we must take responsibility of all the things that happen in our experience. And in doing that, you realize, oh, wait a minute. I am the source of the problem. I am the problem. And once you accept that, you can cleanse the problem in you. And then you will naturally cleanse the problem in the outer environment. Whatever you do with it, whatever changes you make within yourself, will be reflected in the outer environment. Now, what happened for me was that when I started doing this practice, I was very disciplined for the first few weeks. And what I noticed about after 3 days of repeating this practice over and over again, all day, every day, naturally I began doing things that I previously hadn't been doing. In other words, without any effort at all, after 3 days, I woke up early and I went for a long run with no effort at all. I did not have to force myself out of bed. I did not have to try. It just happened. Why did it just happen? Because through this practice, my frequency was raised. And because my frequency was raised, that version of me on that timeline did more. And eventually that would lead to having more. This is the interesting thing I was just thinking about earlier. Because again, often we know what we should do, but the problem is, we're not the version of ourselves that is already doing it. That is why there is often a mismatch between who we are and what we know we need to do that would lead us to having the life that we desire. And so the only option that we have is to force ourselves to do things in a kind of desperate attempt to get what we want. But that is not the wise way to do things. The wise way to do things is to be more. And the version of you that is more already does all the things that will lead you to your dream life. Now there's a bit of a conundrum here because, well, how do you raise your frequency? How is this possible? Without doing things. Well, there is a little bit to be done because, well, your actions create your identity. There's a whole cycle going on. It's a simple way of looking at it. You could call this the karmic cycle. This is the 101 of how we create our reality. That is, the identity creates thoughts. Our thoughts evoke certain emotions that are related to those thoughts. Those emotions influence us to take action, and those actions create consequences in our life. And then we can reflect on those consequences, and we can change our reaction, or we can change our actions based on whether or not we enjoy whatever consequences we created. So if you experience bad consequences, well, it was a result of your actions, feelings, thoughts, and identity. So you can stop feeding whatever caused the negative consequences. And vice versa. If you experience something good, you can repeat the same actions or you can repeat the same thoughts. Forgot where I was at. Why did I begin this train of thought? Nobody knows. There. Hold still. There we go. I have remembered. The point was, how do we raise our frequency without doing things? And then we arrived at the karmic cycle, and then, well, one thing we need to realize is that we only have control over two things in this life. Our conscious thoughts and our actions. Now, this might seem like a bit of a tragedy, but it's a very good thing. It means that 99% of reality you don't have to care about, because these are the only two things that you have power over. You can only change your actions, and you can only change your conscious thoughts, which is also, you can change the way you react to your thoughts, to your experiences. You have no control over your emotions directly. Otherwise, you would just feel happy all the time. without any effort. Now, identity comes in two parts: your conscious identity and your unconscious identity. And so you can change your conscious identity, and that's also like changing your thoughts. Because you can think, well, who do I want to be? So through your thoughts, through the thoughts you consciously think, you can evoke certain emotions. And those emotions can influence you to take action. And thoughts can also change your conscious identity, which will ultimately influence your unconscious identity. And your actions, which have the greatest effect, the most impact over everything. Your actions will evoke emotions. Your actions will evoke thoughts. It will create consequences. It will change your identity. As it is often said, we are the accumulation of our habits, and habits are just actions taken consistently. So there are a few ways we can go about this. The easiest way is to change your thoughts and change your life. You see, one of the reasons that Ho'oponopono is so effective is because those 4 affirmations are some of the most powerful affirmations in existence. And plus, the practice of Ho'oponopono is not just about the affirmations, but it's about being in the habit of repeating positive thoughts. So when you build the habit of repeating these affirmations, you continuously inject positive thoughts into your mind. And not only does this clear away the negative memory, which is blocking our energy and lowering our frequency, but at the same time, it also increases our frequency, because everything is energy and every thought has its own frequency. A positive thought has a higher frequency and a negative thought has a lower frequency. So when you ruminate on negative thoughts, what's going to happen? Your frequency is going to lower and you're going to shift to more negative timelines. But when you're constantly and intentionally thinking positive thoughts, you can naturally raise your frequency, which is what I believe happened for me. After the 3 days, I shifted to a higher timeline. I felt it. It was a visceral feeling. I woke up one morning and I felt that I had quantum leaped. There was a tangible change, because another benefit to repeating affirmations or the practice of Ho'oponopono is that it also creates focus. Because how often do we allow our negative thoughts to snowball out of control? When you're focusing one-pointedly on a certain thing, whether it's a mantra, whether it's Ho'oponopono, you don't allow negative thoughts to fester. There's no room for them. So you snuff out all the negative thoughts and you only allow positive ones. So this, in a way, exponentially raises your frequency by eliminating the negativity. So not so like that. By eliminating the negative memory that is there, preventing from any new negative memory to emerge, and then also focusing your attention one-pointedly on positivity. That is how we use our thoughts to rise our frequency. And what happens is that as your frequency rises, you become a higher frequency being, and you will naturally engage in higher frequency behaviors. Now another way, this is the way most people do it, you can use discipline. That is, for instance, you know you will feel better after you engage in a certain action. You know, for instance, working out is going to raise your frequency. The only problem is you don't feel like doing it. And so you kind of push yourself a bit more. You force yourself to engage in what you know is good. Things that are good for us often are painful up front, but are rewarding later. And things that are bad for us are often rewarding up front and painful later. Because again, we all know what is good for us. We know that working out is good. It's just that we don't want to do it sometimes. But the way I like to approach such a thing is called the path of least resistance. The path of least resistance is effortless by its very nature. It's designed so that your mind doesn't resist. If you know you have to do something difficult, your mind will come up with a million excuses. Oh, it's too hard. It's too cold. I don't want to do this today. But the path of least resistance ensures that your mind has nothing, no arguments. because you do the least possible effort of what you know is good. For example, you want to start working out. Instead of forcing yourself to do a crazy workout, you take the path of least resistance. You do the minimal amount of effort that you're willing to do. The point of this is not working out. It is to build a habit. So for instance, instead of going for a run in the morning, depending on how low or high your frequency is. If you're in a low frequency state, sometimes you could barely get out of bed in the morning. So a morning run is just outside of the equation. If you're down here, you can't just hop all the way up here. You have to kind of go step by step. It's too big of a leap to make. This is how I escaped depression. What it was, one of the foundations, was a 10-minute walk. Because a 10-minute walk is generally effortless. When I didn't feel like actually working out, I still do this to this day. Instead of doing nothing, I just do less. Instead of going for a 3-mile jog, I might go for a 10-minute walk if I don't feel like going for a run. And what this does, it keeps your body in the habit of moving. And what happens is that the process becomes automatic. Every time you leave your house, it triggers the habit. It triggers the action. So if every morning you go for a 10-minute walk, and because it takes no effort, it's easy, it's smooth. And then after a few days of doing this, you free up willpower and you can push yourself a little bit more. The point is to make it as easy as possible. More easy than easy. Because instead of trying to force yourself to do more, like you're a slave dragging yourself along, instead you're almost like, well, I want to do more. I can do more. And so you take inspired action. After a few days of doing a 10-minute walk, you say, well, why not do 15? And so in this way, you can effortlessly engage in more difficult actions simply by creating the habit and then pushing yourself a little bit more. And before you know it, you might be going for a 3-mile run in the mornings. And on the days you don't feel like doing it, you might just do 1 mile. But the point is, what makes the path of least resistance work is consistency. That's the whole point. If you're not consistent, then it doesn't work. But all you need for consistency is to show up. It doesn't matter necessarily about the quality of your work. It doesn't matter about how hard you go. It doesn't matter how much work you do. What matters is that you engage in the first step. And once the first step is taken, everything else will unfold. So, we all know the high frequency behaviors. And exercise really should be the foundation of our lives, because it is the simplest way to increase our frequency. Why is this the case? Well, because as we've previously discussed, you see, not only does the intensity and the amount of energy matter, but also the flow. You ever thought why exercise feels good in the first place? It's because energy is life. And so when you get your energy flowing, you allow life to flow. Now, what is life? The more connected you are to life, the better you feel. The more you're inspired, the more you're motivated to live and do things. And the more you grow closer to death, the more you feel depressed, the more you feel lethargic, the more you feel like not doing anything. You don't feel like living. As Carl Jung said, people don't have ideas. Ideas have people. You see, it is the life in you that is living you. It is not you living life. What does this mean? It's that when the life is flowing powerfully through you, when you have a lot of energy, you will naturally get up and do things. Imagine if I told you you had to stay in bed for the next 7 days and do nothing. You would go crazy, because the life in you is the force that drives you to live. It is the force that is driving you to do things. You have no say in that. And think about it, when you're depressed, when you're in the grip of death, it doesn't matter how hard you try, you don't feel like being alive, you don't feel like doing anything, because the force of death has possessed you. we are in the grip of higher powers, of these energies. We fight not against flesh and blood, but principalities. That is why when we're stuck in these low frequency states, we will naturally engage in low frequency behavior, which is why we feel like a slave to things like addictions, to negative thinking patterns, to negative actions, self-destructive behavior. It's not you that sins, it is the sin living in you. This is the crazy thing about life, is that depending on where you are on this spectrum, depending on the overall frequency that you operate at, everything unfolds automatically. If you are down here, it doesn't matter how hard you try to be a good person. You will just naturally do things that aren't good for you. And when you're up here, you will naturally not do anything that is bad for you. Not that you won't. That depends on whatever negative memory you still hold in your body. The point is that life unfolds automatically. So we don't have to strive so hard to force reality to be as we want it to. All we have to do is rise our frequency. And from this higher state of being, we will naturally engage in higher frequency actions and receive a higher frequency life. Now, what I've experienced, and I believe it is natural for most people. Imagine for a moment you were like a balloon. Now, a balloon naturally wants to rise up. Our frequency is trying to return to source, return to heaven. You can look at this as our soul or just the totality of our being. So when spiritual people say, everything you want wants you, this is true. This is why. Your dream life, everything that you desire in this life, is actively trying to make its way toward you. The universe is doing its best to help you with everything you want. The problem is that we have all of this conditioning, and this conditioning is like mud on the balloon. Conditioning can be trauma, negative memories, etc. And the heavier that mud is, the heavier our conditioning, the more trauma we have, the more naturally we will fall to lower frequencies. And from what I've experienced, well, if the conditioning is heavy enough and you go all the way to hell, the fire of hell will burn away that conditioning. The suffering you experience will burn away that negative karma, which will allow you to rise back up. You could say the midpoint between heaven and hell is earth, or the world, or purgatory. So hell is not a place of punishment, it's a rehabilitation center in which after you experience the suffering that purifies you, the purification of fire, you get the opportunity to return to life and try again. This can happen in one life, it can happen in many lives, but we don't need to think about future lives in order to understand this. This can happen in the same lifetime. And so what will happen in our lives is that when we try to reach a higher timeline, imagine like a wall or like a passage. Here we are trying to live a better life, to go to a higher timeline. But there are parts of ourselves, there's conditioning that is not allowed to go through this doorway. It's not allowed to pass. And so we cannot break through until we let go of that conditioning, that negative memory, those old patterns. And so what happens is that oftentimes when we are just on the cusp of a breakthrough, that is when the old patterns arise. And in that moment we have an opportunity to react differently. It is not necessarily a test, although we can look at it that way, but rather the negativity, the negative memory is arising for you to let go of, or you can continue feeding it, which will drop you back down, in which you will just try again and try again forever until you let go. And that is part of the fun of life. Ups and downs. Life is a roller coaster. That's another reason why Ho'oponopono is such a wonderful practice. It's because when that negative memory arises, you can repeat the practice. And that will help cleanse that negative memory, which will more easily allow you to rise to higher states of being. You see, when we make a mistake, or when we fall into old habits or old patterns, we have a choice. As I mentioned earlier, you see, when we live from ego, because we live in these animal bodies, we desire to pursue pleasure and avoid pain, but the darkness and the light are equally important to the wholeness of all things. Whole. The negativity is not worse than the positivity, but that is how we experience it. It's also chaos and order, life and death. We prefer life. We do not want to die, but both forces are equally important for the natural flow. And so you have a choice, because, well, first, life happens in expansion and contraction phases. The natural flow, ups and downs. We just want to expand all the time, but that would not work. So no matter what, you're going to reach a peak at some point, you're going to hit a wall, and then you're going to come back down. So it's not that it's a linear process of just going straight up. You go up and down and up and down and up and down. And how well we manage these contraction phases will determine our success. So throughout your life, you'll go up in frequency and you go down. Going down in frequency is not a bad thing. It's necessary. But if we're so obsessed with raising our vibration, I gotta be a high frequency person, well, then you're naturally going to resist the down cycles, the contraction phases. And what we resist persists. In other words, because we have an attachment toward only going up, we become imbalanced and we interrupt the flow of life. So what happens when we start going down, we start resisting and we start feeding the negativity. Because again, our mind can focus in three directions. We can either be non-attached and be neutral, we can focus positively, or we can focus on what is negative. And if we are too attached to the positive, naturally we will reject the negative. And when we resist, we react negatively to our experiences. So we tell our body, look, there's a threat here, there's a danger, I'm low, my frequency is lowering. This is not good. What did I do wrong? You begin obsessing about the psychological drama of it all. I made a mistake, I'm such a bad person. And then you can't help but focus on negativity. Because, as I started to say, your reactions tell your body, tell your unconscious mind, your conscious mind, your body, your unconscious mind, they work together, but your body is blind. It doesn't understand anything other than the information your mind feeds it. So when you react negatively to a situation, you tell your unconscious, oh, well, you better pay attention because something here is threatening my survival. So your unconscious mind will hijack your attention and cause you to hyper-focus on negativity, thus really lowering your frequency, causing you to fall into a downward spiral. Why? Because we were too attached to one side and became imbalanced. Both forces are necessary for balance. Therefore, when you find yourself in a contraction phase, let's say after you hit that wall, and instead of breaking through it, you engaged in an addiction, into a same old pattern that you've been trying to escape, do your best to remember that the darkness and the light are equally important, that God will use your mistakes for your growth, and that God will not give you any burden that is too much for you. But God does not promise that if you add extra burdens upon yourself, God does not promise that these things will not destroy you. In other words, there is burdens that build you up, and there's burdens that break you. All burdens that are natural are designed to build you up. But because we have free will through our conscious mind, through our actions, we can add more burdens upon ourselves. What does that mean? It means when you make a mistake, you begin ruminating on all the shame, on all the guilt, on all the ways you're such a bad person. Oh, why did I do this? I'm so terrible. You're feeding the negativity. You're ruminating upon it. You're obsessing with negativity. And therefore, you are just plummeting downward, my friend. You see, it is not wrong to feel shame or guilt or fear. It is a necessary force. What happens, what destroys us, is that when we fall into a downward spiral, say you go in here, if you put too many burdens upon yourself by ruminating on negativity. Instead of hitting a floor in which you can bounce back, you break through that floor, you rise and you fall to lower states of being, to lower timelines in which there is more suffering, there is more problems. That is why problems often come in packs. You experience one problem and then one problem after another and after another. This is why it is said that those who have more will be given, and those who have not, even what they have will be taken. Why? Because people are a slave to their senses. They look at the outer world and say, this is the fact of reality. So they only focus on what is right in front of them. And so if you have a problem, well, guess what? You're focusing on problems. And we will always create more of what we focus on. So when you see a problem, you focus on it. And then that lowers your frequency. And then more problems arise. And then you're looking at more problems, which lowers your frequency. And so that is how people fall into a downward spiral all the way to hell, which at the end of it all is suicide. Because as you continue to hemorrhage your energy by focusing on negativity, there is no more life left in you to motivate you to live. So you become completely possessed by the death force. And death takes over and forces you to kill yourself. And you may even do it accidentally, by unconsciously walking in front of a bus. But it is not you that does it. It is the force of death that has possessed you. Where we went wrong was that we allowed our attention to drift toward negativity for too long, hemorrhaging our energy and losing our life. So what life will kind of look like is this. You want higher highs and higher lows. It's very interesting. When I was into crypto back in the day, they have these charts, and each day there was a candle that determined, well, how high did the price go, or how low did it go that day, and it would create this chart. And I realized that our lives are the same exact thing. For the crypto, the price would go up, the price would go down, and fluctuate. And so too does the same thing happen with our own frequency. Every day it fluctuates up and down, but what you want is over the long term. On the short term, it doesn't matter how your frequency fluctuates, so long as on the long term you are on an upward trajectory. Because, well, on a short term, think about exercise for a moment. Exercise takes energy. So when you exercise, initially you will lose energy. Your body doesn't want to lose energy, which is why it is difficult to do hard things. But if you know how to delay gratification, if you understand that exercise will raise your frequency in the long term, well, then it doesn't matter if temporarily your frequency goes down. If you have a difficult exercise, you might not feel like doing much afterwards because you're tired. What does tired mean? It means you don't have energy. Why do we go to sleep at night? Because every day we wake up and hopefully we have energy. And that as we go throughout our day, our daily actions, we use that energy up. And when that energy is used up, guess what? We get tired and we go to a temporary death called sleep. And hopefully, ideally for you, when you go to sleep at night, your energy is restored. And start the process all over again. Which is why we have to get into the mindset that down is not bad, death is not bad if you do not sleep. We all love sleep, but that both forces are necessary for the flow of life. And that will help you not resist these contraction phases. And so what will happen, how to get this long-term trajectory, is that when you have this attitude, or when you have this understanding that God will use all the problems and the struggles you face to build you back up. And if we can go into these experiences with that mindset, we can transmute the negativity into positivity and rise to higher states of being. But people who fail at life, who, with stocks and crypto, this would be considered a successful investment, but a non-successful investment has a long-term downward trajectory. This life is called a comedy. This one is called a tragedy. This is what happens if you don't learn to handle those contraction phases. If you don't learn to handle your mind. And so what happens when you realize that everything that you go through is exactly what you need for your highest spiritual growth? You begin looking for it. When you change your conscious attitude toward life, and you stop complaining, you stop being a victim, you stop allowing yourself to ruminate on the shame, the guilt, the fear, all your mistakes of the past, all your imaginary evils in the future. Every time you hit a contraction phase, every time you experience a problem, a negative time in your life, you will always come back out on top, better than before. Because negative energy is still power, and it's a very powerful force. And so when you learn how to transmute it, you use it to drive you up. But you see, because negative energy is the death force, if you cannot handle it properly, guess what? It will destroy you. But if you learn how to handle it properly, nothing in life will ever destroy you, no matter what you go through. And that is what it means to become a master of the universe, a divine alchemist, where everything you touch turns to gold. Let's touch upon an important point. It is often called reality transurfing. You see, imagine a radio, and each radio station has a certain frequency associated with it. So you have heaven radio, and you have hell radio, and every station in between. On hell radio, all the songs are the songs you hate the most. And on heaven radio, all the songs are the songs you love the most. The radio station is the timeline, and the songs are your experiences. So what you want is you want to tune to the higher frequency, in which your dream life is already present. Now the mind is the tool that tunes into the specific frequency. The clearer you get about the life that you want, the more accurate you can tune the frequency. Whereas the feelings are like tuning the knob, the force that changes the channel. So this determines what frequency you tune to. This determines the action of tuning to that frequency. Because think about it practically. If you're in hell, how do you feel all the time? You feel nothing but suffering. That is all. You think nothing but negative thoughts. And what is heaven like? You feel heavenly bliss all the time. And you think positive thoughts all the time. And so, simply put, if you want to tune to higher frequency realities and live the best life you can imagine, you almost don't even need to understand what you want. Because we all know what heaven is like. Heaven is love, peace, joy, and abundance. All that is required is that we tap into these feelings. Now, we have to understand the feelings arise from within us. We think that things in the outer world are what create these feelings, but it's not true. It's the way we react to our experiences that evoke certain feelings. Two people can go through the same situation and come out completely differently based on how they focus their attention, based on their attitude. Again, this is why Ho'oponopono is so powerful, but it also includes any other positive affirmations. Because when you're constantly flooding your mind with positivity, you naturally begin feeling better. And the better you feel, the more positive thoughts you will feel. And then the more positive actions you will take in a positive upward spiral in which you are on the train to heaven, a beautiful and great life. Now, the problem that most people have is, first of all, they're not clear. For instance, if you don't have a vision for your life, naturally you will drift. If you don't have a direction that you're going, where are you going to go? You're going to wander. So we need a dream vision for our life. But even that can kind of be sidestepped, because whatever our dream life is, even if we don't know it, we know that it will include great amounts of love, peace, joy, and abundance. So, with that infinite potential we discussed earlier, the potential version of you, the heavenly version, is experiencing these emotions all the time. So in order to tap in to the radio station of our dream life, hope I'm in the camera, all we have to do is focus our mind in a way that evokes these feelings. How do we do that? First, by consciously implanting positive seeds in our mind. Again, why Ho'oponopono is so powerful. I love you. You cultivate love. Thank you. You cultivate gratitude. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Removes the negativity, removes the guilt, removes the shame, removes the fear. And so you have peace and joy. And also, repeating a mantra in your mind, a positive affirmation, it keeps your attention focused, because the mind can only focus on one thing at a time. And so you're either focusing on what is negative or you're focusing on what is positive. And when you're focusing on what is positive, you cannot focus on what is negative. Which is why if you repeat positive affirmations all the time, it's not about getting an outcome. It's about building the habit of positive thinking. And the habit will produce the result automatically. But if we're focused on the result, well then guess what? When you don't see the result that you want, there's a possibility that you will give up. Being produces actions naturally. But if you're focused on so much on doing, well, that is not sustainable. Because in a way, you're forcing yourself to be someone that you're not yet. But I should say on this journey, again, it's not going to be a linear process. You're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days. And with abundance, how do you feel abundant? Well, here's a good way of looking at it. All desire is a reflection of lack and scarcity. I mean, obviously, if you desire something, you are saying, well, I don't have that thing and I want it. So this is why when you're so attached to your desires, they don't come to you. You repel them because you're giving off the energy of lack and scarcity. And so you're not open to receive. You're not able to shift to the higher timelines in which you already have what you want. So if you are to get what you want, how does it happen? Well, you either get to force yourself, you force reality to get what you want, or you find inner contentment. Because the version of you that has everything that you want does not want what you want. It has what you want. Therefore, the version of you feels content and satisfied. It does not have the desire. That is why one of the most powerful ways to get what you want in this life is to let go. Forget about it. Surrender. It said, what you release most completely, you receive most completely. And it's counterintuitive because we think, well, without the desire, how will I get what I want? It is my actions that lead to the consequences. But that is three-dimensional thinking, lower consciousness. Whereas this, you're operating from being. You're being the highest version of yourself, the one who is already satisfied, the one who is already content. And you send off the energy of abundance. The less you need, the more abundance you will experience. But the more you need, the more lack and scarcity you will experience. Because when you operate from a place of desire, you act in ways that reinforce lack and scarcity. And so you get more. But if you be from a place of inner contentment, then you act in a way that is non-needy, that is non-repulsive. You act in a way that creates more abundance. As I said in a recent video, be the source of what you seek. Everything you need is already within you. If you want love in your life, give more love. Give more loving thoughts to people. Bless people with your loving thoughts. I love you. If you want more peace in your life, well, guess what? Stop going to war with yourself, because you can't have war and peace at the same time. Stop judging yourself. Stop judging your life. Stop judging your experiences, because all of these things take away your peace. Peace and love and joy and abundance are the natural state. You don't need anything to be at peace, but you always need something to take away your peace. We self-sabotage our own life. Think about this too. If you continuously struggle in relationships, well, a big part of it might be you're lacking self-love. Because when you love yourself, you will be on the frequency of other people who love themselves. But if you do not love yourself, you will be on the frequency of, for instance, attracting people who take advantage of you, attracting other people who do not love themselves. And it will be more like a transactional relationship where people just use each other for temporary pleasure. There is no real love involved. So if you want love, you have to first cultivate love within you. If you want more joy, enjoy the moment. You see, because we're always thinking that happiness will be found in the future, once I get this desire or that. But guess what? In the future, it's still going to be the present moment. In the past, it was the present moment, and right now, it is, guess what? Life can only be experienced in the present moment. And so the more separated you are from the present moment, the less you are truly living. And so the best way to prepare for the future, to enjoy the future, is to enjoy the moment. If you can master enjoying the moment, you master life. And again, abundance. If you want to receive abundance, find inner contentment. Eventually, on the spiritual journey, you realize the present moment is all you need. Because again, heaven is the source of life itself. The nature of God is the source of all bliss and abundance. And bliss is simply the combination of joy, love, and peace together. The kingdom of God is within you, which is why Jesus Christ said, seek first the kingdom of heaven, and then everything else will be added onto you. Because when you are immersed in feelings of abundance, joy, love, peace, looks like fence, you automatically shift to the timeline in which you have everything you desire. So seek God, because God is the source of all that you desire. The more you cultivate a relationship with God, the more God will help you on your journey. It will help you deal with the contraction phases, the negative times, the suffering. And God will help you achieve all that you desire. We become united with what we focus on. Think about it this way. Have you ever wondered why one person becomes a saint, another a serial killer, another a billionaire, and another a homeless person? I mean, we all have the same amount of hours in the day. What is the cause of such differences in human life? It's simple. We focus on different things. So we direct our energy in different ways. And so we create different lives for ourselves. You see, those who look at the world do not see God, and those who look at God do not see the world. So you have a choice. It's a big forehead. You can obsess about satisfying all your worldly desires and ignore God. You see, there's a reason Jesus said, seek not riches of the earth in which the moth and the rust consumes. Because the nature of the world, everything's changing, everything's temporary, everything in truth. The true nature of everything of this world is dust. From dust we arose, and to dust we will return. So, when we spend our lives trying to achieve worldly things, what we're actually saying, the truth of it is, I want more piles of dust. Because that person has a lot of dust, and I want more. People, for thousands of years, since the beginning of time, have murdered each other for dust, for bigger mountains of dust. Congratulations, you played yourself, because you came into this life with nothing, and you leave this life with nothing. But the realm of God is eternal. It is what is real. It is what sustains us. So instead, if you turn your attention toward God, you receive the only thing that is real, the only thing that matters. And the fun part is, the amazing part of it is that when you primarily focus your attention toward God, you can return to the world and have as much fun as you want. Because you already made it, my friend. But no matter what you do in the world, you're always going to have to come back here. Because so long as you are cut off from source, the source of life itself, you will always feel empty inside. You can gain all the money, all the nice things, the material objects, the relationships, and something in you will still feel like it's not enough. But the moment you find God, the moment you tap in to the innermost core of your being, through the present moment, you can become completely content and satisfied with nothing of the world. Because what we have in us is a black hole, and a black hole is eternal. And you cannot fill something that is eternal with something that is temporary. But you can fill the eternal with the eternal. Like I said, the black hole of zero can only be filled by the infinite of energy. And you will feel at one, and that is satisfaction, that is inner contentment. And you will have tapped into the source of all joy, peace, and love. So the quicker you can focus your attention one-pointedly, all of that big attention you've got toward God, the quicker you will rise to your highest dream life. And you may just allow life to unfold as it does. No expectations, no assumptions. And see where the cards land. But that only works if you're focused on God. Because God already knows all the things that you desire, all the things that you want, all the things that are good for you. And so God can provide these things better than you can provide yourself. That is why we surrender. We let go. Because we allow the higher power of existence to guide ourselves, rather than to allow ourselves to get pulled by our little ego, trying to satisfy our little ego desires in the world, that which will never bring true satisfaction. So begin communicating to God through prayer. Ask God for guidance, and it doesn't matter what name you give it. As long as you have good intentions, as long as you want the best, God has no choice but to answer your prayers, because that is what God wants more than anything. But God will not infringe upon your free will, so if you do not ask, you will not receive. You see, we talked about focusing our mind on negativity or positivity. But the highest possible thing, the most positive possible thing, is God. So when we focus our attention on God, we naturally rise up toward heaven and cultivate more peace, love, and joy. When we think loving thoughts, we connect to the divine. When we stop engaging in the actions that take away our peace, we connect to the divine. When we stop allowing the shame, the guilt, the fear, we stop ruminating on it, but we use it for our highest spiritual growth. That is when we connect to the divine. Because the nature of God is wholeness and balance. The negative trauma that we have, the negative memory that creates the energy blockages, it creates imbalance and separates us from God. But the whole fun of life, the whole game, is that, well, from God's perspective, everything is perfect. What does God need to do anything? Therefore, the game of life is, well, God, the one, became two. And now, from this place of separation, we can rejoice in the act of returning to wholeness. In other words, we come into this life to work out our karmic destiny. Well, think about it this way. Let's say you have pure energy, right? Pure energy. Then through our journey throughout the universe, this pure energy becomes conditioned. It becomes all knotted up, becomes unique, and that is karma. And so we enter into this life to become pure once again. As Jesus said, unless you come to me as little children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven, because the kingdom of heaven is pure. So we go through this life to let go of karmic attachments, to become free of the energy blockages. And that is the game of life. We are imbalanced, and through the problems, through the struggles that we go through, that is the process in which we return to wholeness, we return to God. So do not run away from your problems. Do not be afraid of your mistakes, but realize they are the pathway to enlightenment. The obstacle is the way. One way to think about this is, we all come from the same one source, the Big Bang, which means that everything was the exact same in the beginning. But now look at where we are. Look at how each planet in our solar system is so unique, let alone all the planets and all the other galaxies and all the other solar systems. That is karma. Karma is why the Earth looks like the way it does. Venus, Mars, it's all made up of the same pure energy, but again, vibrating at different frequencies of existence. Karma is the unique way in which we manifest in this life. And in this state of separation, we go through this soul's journey on this planet and on other planets, in which we work out our karmic things so that we can return to God and rejoice in the heavenly bliss. Because life is given its meaning through contrast. Sometimes we have to become lost so we can rejoice in the act of being found. We have to live in ignorance so that we can rejoice in the experience of coming to the truth. We have to live in separation so that we can rejoice in coming home back to unity. That, my friends, is the game of life. The dynamic play, the yin-yang. It all begins with awareness. Pay attention to your thoughts, to the words that you speak, where you allow your attention to drift. Begin focusing your thoughts, your words, your attention toward God. And that is the quickest way to heaven, obviously. The more you feel love, the more you feel peace and joy, the more you know you are on the right path. And the more you are separated from love, peace, and joy, the more you have temporarily detoured, the closer you have strayed to hell. It's not always a bad thing, but one must have the wisdom of discernment. This is called your emotional guidance system. You take your awareness and shift it onto your body on a daily basis, and you allow your feelings to guide you. The better you feel, the more you know you are on an upward trajectory. And the worse you feel, the more you may have temporarily gone down a bit. But again, remember, life is a roller coaster. The ups and downs are what make it fun. So don't feel so guilty on the contraction phases, but transmute the negativity into positivity. I am Ray. Check out my cool store. Much peace and many blessings. And remember, oh, I forgot where the bee went.
Just be